Okay, now that we understand a little bit more about the history of Eclipse and how Eclipse is part of the Android developer tools, it's time to go through now and have a bit of a tour of the interface, just so we can become a little bit more aware of some of the common functionality and how to get our navigate our way around it. Okay, so I'm going to start by going into my developer folder, into my ADT Android Developer Tools folder. I'm going to go into my Eclipse subfolder. And I'm going to start Eclipse by double-clicking it. Now by default, that message is still coming up telling us where Eclipse proposes to save our projects. So we'll leave that as the default, that's fine. And we're now in the Eclipse interface. So the first thing to point out is that what you're seeing on the screen now is called a perspective. That's Eclipse's terminology, which basically is a term used to define or to describe everything you're seeing on the screen. So each of these areas, like for example over here, Package Explorer, this is called a view. Down the bottom we've got different views, problems, Java doc, declaration, console. And as we go through the course further, we'll be finding out more about these areas. Over here is an outline, and in here is the main sort of Java editor, where we will be editing our code. So collectively, all these views are called perspectives. And Eclipse comes bundled with a number of pre-made perspectives. So to access those, we can go up to the window menu, and we can click on Open Perspective. For example, we can choose DDMS. Now as I do that, you'll see that the screen updates and we've got a completely separate or different set of views. So for example, here on the left hand side is devices, and that will show up any Android devices that are connected. So what I'll do now is I'll connect my Android device just so you can see what happens. Now you can see my Android device started there. So what that's telling us, if we open up a little bit more, is I've got an Asus Nexus 7, and that's actually a Google Nexus 7 tablet device, and that tells us what version of the Android operating system it's currently running. You can see it's 4.4.4, which of course is Android KitKat. And over here is various things to track the usage of threads, which are part of an application, how much memory is being used, allocation trackers, all those types of things, but we won't get into that now because we're not at that stage. And down here, down the bottom of Logcat, is an area where you can actually get a log of what's happening on your Android device or through your emulator, through your Android virtual device. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, so we'll look at that in a future video. So I'll just go back over here to the top right hand corner. I can click on a Java perspective. Now we're back to very similar to what we actually started with. The good thing about these perspectives is you can customize them as well. Like for example, if we go back to DDMS, you might come back and decide, well look, I really want this logcat to be showing when I'm in Java, because obviously on this screen here, we haven't got any facilities to do any editing. So but if we go back to our Java, this area in the middle is where we'll be doing our editing. So you might decide that you want to put your logcat, your logs in this particular area. So a simple way of doing that would be to go to Window, Show View, click on Other, select Android, and I can choose Logcat. And you'll see we've now got Logcat in this view. Now we can drag that as well. We wanted to put it into another area, we can drag it up to here, and we've now got it in there as well. And of course we can close it. So it's very simple to sort of manipulate and change things as you need to. Obviously early on, you probably won't have a need to do much, if any, of this sort of thing, but it is there down the track for when we were looking further at doing that. Now, just out of interest, remember that Eclipse is a general or it's a generic product, not specifically developed for Android. So as a result, you don't always necessarily see things that are specific to Android. Now, as an example, if we click on File and go to New and select Java Project, now what you see on the screen there is an option to create a new Java project. Now you will notice that it's using the default location. That's the location we saw when the Eclipse was loaded up, and we can choose what type of version of Java is going to be executed or be run with this as well, and lots of other things. But you can see probably if you look at that, there's nothing specific about Android with that. So this would be the wrong area to get into. This is not an area that we would normally be working with. For example, as we just saw, Android application, that is an option purely for Android development. And in terms of perspectives, DDMS is an Android specific one, and that's why it shows obviously the Android device and all these other things which are really made and set up for using Android. But we'll be talking more about those as we move forward. The only other thing I want to show you about perspectives before we move on is that you have got the ability to save them as well. So if we go back and just look at this standard outline, and we'll go back and we'll add our custom view again. We're going to add an additional logcat again. We're going to go to logcat. And bearing in mind, if you're in the wrong area, you can close these and you can choose any of these other areas if you want to, but I'm selecting an Android specific thing. I'm going to go back to our logcat. And I'll select that and OK it. But I'm going to drag it down this time down to here. And if you like the look of that and you decided, well, look, I'm happy with the way that's organized, you can click on Window and you can save perspective as, and you can type in a name or choose my name and save it. And you can see here over on the right hand side, I've now got my own perspective. But I can go back to Window, open perspective, and go back to the Java one, which was the default one we started with. And you can see that that's now removed. And of course, if I then go through two ways of doing it, I can click on the perspective here to bring that back up on the screen. Or of course, I can just go to open perspective and click on other and choose the perspective I want. So we'll leave that as it is for now. So what I'm going to do now is just show you briefly, very quickly, how to go through and open up and create a new project. We're not going to go and do any real functionality at this stage because we've got in the next section, we're going to go through step by step on creating a new project from scratch. But I just want to quickly show you how to do it. And essentially it's going into new, clicking on Android application project, typing in our project name. And we'll be talking more about project names because you'll notice that the Eclipse editor has automatically taken out the spacing. We'll be talking more about package names. And in a previous video, I talked about targeting. And this is where ultimately you'll be choosing your SDKs. And this is why it's very important. And you can see as you hover over, Eclipse very helpfully tells you what's going to happen. So choose the lowest version of Android that your application will support. Lower application programming interfaces levels targets more devices, but essentially gives you fewer features because, of course, with each new version of Android, new features come out. And you can see down there, like if you really wanted to go for a really old build, you're going to be really targeting most of the devices, but of course, the functionality is going to look quite old. And likewise with targeting. Now you'll notice on here, it's got Target SDK Android 4.x. Now that actually is the API 21, that's the Android 5. But because I'm shooting this video before it's effectively been officially released, we're still seeing it as 4.x. But essentially the targeting, if you go back, if you decide to target an older version, you're not necessarily going to get the same look and feel, and your application is going to probably look a little bit dated. So for all our apps, we're going to be targeting the latest version. But we'll talk more about that when we get to that stage. And of course, what version we're going to compile with. You remember these two things? We downloaded these the other day. This is the Google API version and then just the generic Android version. We did that within SDK Manager. So I'm just going to select the default. Click on Next. I'm not going to explain these at the moment. We're just going to go through literally and finish this off. Bear in mind with the next section, we are going to go through each one of these sections in detail. Likewise for that screen, we're going to leave that as it is. We click on Finish. Now what's happening there is Eclipse is creating a blank Android project. So essentially we've got something to start off with, and we're not sort of starting and having to do things manually. You can actually see roughly what it's going to look like in this little interface window here. So the area that I wanted to show you, if I can click back here to Main Activity, we talked before about the editor. This is what I was talking about, the area where you'll be editing your code. So you'll be typing in your code and updating it in this section. And I just wanted to point out that if we went to a different perspective, of course, we can't see the code anymore. So that could be a good reason why you'd be wanting to add some extra views within the perspective. So you've literally got everything you want at that point in time. Now the other thing was I wanted to talk about the application compatibility. Do you remember in the SDK manager video when we were installing the Android SDKs, we talked about targeting previous versions? And you can see here, because we've selected a compatibility with an older version of Android, the app compatibility has been automatically added to our project. So Eclipse is quite nice in the sense that it does try and do a lot of these basic things for you. In the past, without Eclipse, you would have had to really figure a lot of these things out yourself, and it would have been a lot more complicated. And just the other thing is, you can see this entire folder structure has been created. And I just want to go back and show you what that looks like on disk as well, and so you can work out the relationship between what you're seeing in Eclipse and what's actually being saved on file. So let's go and have a look at that. So I'm going to go back to Finder. I'm going to go back to my developer folder where my basic files are. This time I'm going to go into my workspace. Now you notice prior to this workspace was empty. We'd never used it. You can see there's now two things in here. There's the app compatibility, and that basically is there because we chose that API 8 when we created the project. But if I go into the test project folder, you'll notice there's a series of folders, and if you're looking down this list, you'll see things look strikingly similar. The fact that they're out of order, but essentially there's a source directory here, and you can see that there's a Java file. But if you go back and have a look, source folder, we can see all the folder structure, and then there's the file. So very much the same file format, if you will, and binary, for example. Binary. So basically there's not really a lot of magic happening. What Eclipse is doing is effectively all the files that you're seeing here are effectively being created in a folder or in a series of subfolders within that sort of root folder, if you will. And we're going to be talking more about that. In actual fact, in a future video, I'm going to be walking you through this entire structure so you understand how it all is put together and the ramifications of using certain parts of it, because a lot of these things are used in various parts of the project, and you need to become aware of it. In actual fact, we'll be understanding this a lot better, so you'll be knowing in far more detail what they all mean and how this all works. The good thing about this is virtually every Android application that you put together is going to be using the same format. So eventually you'll get to know that, okay, all my projects have to have an SRC folder, which stands for source, and that's where my Java files go. They've all got a bin folder. They'll all have an RES for resources. They'll all have a libs for library files, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of structure to this project, and it does make it a lot easier having something like this that you can follow through on. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here and move on to the next section, where we're going to actually start our first project. We're going to do something similar to what we've done here, but we're actually going to be running the project on a device and an emulator, and also on the real Android device.